Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 3 of our 4-part Commander 2017 Upgrade Series, where we're going to talk about some singles that might make these decks just a little bit better, that you could consider picking up. Now, we looked at the Cat deck already, we've looked at the Dragon deck. Today's all about vampires with Vampiric Bloodlust. Later in the week, we'll be back, of course, with the Wizard deck, Arcane Wizardry upgrades. But let's get into these vampires. Now, if you've been watching this video series, you kind of know what to expect here. I'm not going to go too deep into mana bases. We talked a lot about them in the Dragon deck. Some of it is kind of redundant. So if you want my thoughts on mana bases, especially for 5-color mana bases, check out that video. This mana base, a little simpler, of course, being Mardu colors. But I think the upgrades, for the most part, are self-explanatory. We're going to focus more on cards that, just out of the box, aren't necessarily going to change the direction or the theme of the deck much. It's just going to enhance what the deck's already trying to do. Quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to support us. You'll find some links down there to Amazon products. Any of those links, if you make a purchase, a small percentage will come back to help us out. Secondly, you'll also find our Patreon page below as well. Both great ways to help support us and help us keep making videos. With that being said, let's get into the cards. We're going to start off with some creatures. Of course, this is a very creature-centric deck. And as you can imagine, there's a number of creatures, and that's mostly what we're going to talk about today, honestly, that could help make this deck just a little more competitive. We're going to start off with a couple of transform cards, beginning with Bloodline Keeper. And this isn't the cheapest card we're going to see today at $7.18, but I do feel like this could be very, very good in this particular deck. Once you get to 5 vampires, which I don't feel is going to be too difficult, hopefully, in this build, you pay a black, this will transform, becomes a vampire lord at that point. Other vampire creatures you control get +2/+2. This itself has flying. It's a 3/3 prior to transforming, later becomes a 5/5, and regardless of what form it's in, you can tap it to put a 2/2 black vampire creature token with flying on the battlefield. Very, very sweet. Exactly what this deck is trying to do. Another transform card. This one's a lot cheaper, but maybe not quite as good. Darrin Pariah. This is going to cost 78 cents. Very, very cheap. It's a 3/3 flyer on its own. You do sacrifice 3 other creatures to transform it. It also has a madness cost of 3 black. That's worth mentioning. Once you transform, though, it's a 6/5, and whenever this creature does transform, then target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. So it's not all opponents. I mean, you're only targeting one person. In itself, it's not as exciting as like the previous card we looked at that kind of does everything this deck wants to do. But you also have to take into account it's a 3/3 vampire for 5 with flying on the first half. And then if it does transform, a 6/5 flyer vampire. Pretty good. So if you're looking for a budget option, I think this is a fine inclusion. Alright, here's some more creatures that I feel could be pretty strong here. Drana, Liberator of Malachor, $3.90. Actually still pretty affordable. Nice aggressive card that helps build out your team's power toughness. Indulgent Aristocrat. I actually really like this one. Only 26 cents. Real cheap pickup. It's a 1-drop, 1/1 lifelink, but it can grow because if you pay 2 and sacrifice a creature, and maybe you do have a little bit of token generation going on that is expendable, then you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. That includes this one. And finally on this page, Kalatas, Trader of Get. A little expensive, $12.34. I will say it's a great card, but right now it is also a card that sees a fair amount of play in other formats, especially Standard. It hasn't rotated out of Standard yet. Now, if you're thinking about picking this card up just for this deck, I'd probably wait a little bit until it gets a little closer to its Standard rotation time, but if you already have a copy in your collection, I think it's a good inclusion. 3 more creatures to think about. Mirror Entity. You can get this real cheap from the Commander 2016 version of the card at 83 cents, for example, but this is good in probably any creature-heavy deck, but I thought especially for this vampire theme, it kind of makes sense, and it can really kind of build off of the other vampires that are here. It's white, of course, being in the Mardu grouping of colors. Just seemed to be a good fit for a very cheap price. Necropolis Regent, $2.10, not very expensive. And again, maybe not as exciting as some of the other cards we're talking about today, but for 6 mana, you do get a 6/5 flying vampire. That's good. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you have to put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So again, if you can get that damage across 2 players, your vampires can get kind of out of control. Stromkirk Condemned, 43 cents, another cheap one. This one, again, maybe not as thrilling as some of the others, but it's a nice budget option. You can discard a card. Vampires you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, but you can only activate this ability once per turn. It's a 2/2 Vampire Horror on its own. Also, we do have a few Madness cards that we've been talking about today, so maybe it's also a Madness enabler for you. Two final creatures that I was kind of on the fence about, actually. Vampire Nocturnus, I think this is okay in the deck. I mean, $4.92. I used to like this card, but giving away your draws doesn't feel great to me, but it can be a large creature at certain times. And then finally, Vishkal Blood Arbiter, $5.07. Again, not super expensive. Casting cost was high on this one, and that kind of puts me back on this card a little bit. Now, if you get beyond that casting cost, though, it does a lot of things this deck's trying to do, considering it has lifelink, it has an ability that comes into play when you sacrifice a creature, and again, you may have some expendable tokens or something like that, and it also can trade in +1/+1 counters for -1/-1 removal till end of turn on something. So I do like what this card is doing, just the complete package. I'm a little hesitant, though, honestly, on that casting cost. All right, let's talk about one Planeswalker, and one that came to mind for me was Sorin, Lord of Innistrad. You can pick up the dual deck version for $5.42, and it's actually a foil as well, cheaper than the original version from Dark Ascension, which is actually pretty sweet. But I will say this isn't as perfect as like Sarkhan Unbroken is in the Dragon deck. Like, that card is perfect for that deck, but it's just fine. It's a little low on loyalty, I think, for 4 mana. It comes in with a 3, you can +1 it, and if you do, you get a 1/1 black vampire creature token with lifelink. So yes, it plays into what this deck is trying to do somewhat. And then the -2 ability, which I think is actually maybe more interesting. You can get an emblem just right off the bat where creatures you control get +1/+0. So it gives you a little more offense, especially if you have a lot of smaller tokens or something like that. So I think that's pretty cool. The ultimate for it isn't anything mind-boggling. I mean, it's cool in Commander because there might be some really good targets for it, but it's not going to instantly win you the game or anything like that. But I think it's a decent include for the price. Let's move on to some enchantments, and there's actually a number of these here for this deck. Exquisite Blood. Okay, $11.40. It's a little expensive, but Sanguine Bond is in this deck, and it's basically a 2-card win combo. Really a 3-card win combo, because you do have to have either a way to gain life or do damage. But if you do that, then you just win the game, actually, is the way the combo will unfold. So it's a little spiky, and not all play groups might appreciate that. If they can't find a way to stop the combo, game basically ends. But if you're in a more spiky play group, this could be a good pickup for you. Fervor, I just picked this one because I was looking for a way to speed up the deck a little bit. You have a lot of great creatures, but I figured, how can you get them attacking faster? Well, Fervor is a cheap way to do it. 64 cents if you want that Magic 2015 version, giving all your creatures haste. Intangible Virtue, I thought of a couple cards here that were cheap and focused a little bit on the token strategy, and if you wanted to flush that strategy out a little bit, maybe you could with cards like this. This one, only 23 cents. And the second one along those lines, Leyline of the Meek at $1.49. And then finally, I looked at Stensia Masquerade. It's only 20 cents. It's like really, really cheap, and it does enough to be interesting for me. Giving attacking creatures first strike can be very, very good in certain situations. You can get it out for the madness cost. That's kind of nice. And also, whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it also builds out the power and toughness of your team. A lot going on there for 20 cents. All right, let's look at some artifacts. Just a couple, and honestly, these could probably fit into any tribal deck, but I picked them specifically for this deck because I feel like they're good fits for the aggressiveness of this vampire deck. So we have Belby's Portal, $4.55. Of course, you're going to pick vampires when this enters the battlefield, and then at any time you can pay 3 and tap it to put a creature card of the chosen type from your hand into play. So it's a way to cheat these into play. Now, something like Dragon Arch is probably a little bit better for the Dragon deck, right? We saw that one in yesterday's video. But this one I think is especially good just generally in decks where you're going to have more mono-colored creatures like you see with a lot of the black vampires here. Coat of Arms, again, this could really go anywhere, but I figured I'd feature it in this video because this is a more aggressive deck. You can get the dual deck version for just $6.80. That's the cheapest version of the card. And that is it for today's upgrades. So I hope that helps a little bit. These videos really are to get you thinking about upgrades, and I'm sure there's a lot of good ideas out there. I'd love to hear them in the comments below. This is really just a sampling of what you could do or the directions you could go with a deck like this. Hopefully it just gets the conversation started, if nothing else. And like I said, we're going to be back later in the week with that Wizard video. Tomorrow we will also have our regular Market Watch video, and there's a number of Commander cards I am tracking for tomorrow's video. So you'll definitely want to tune into that if you're a Commander player. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.